Alright, 동아 타다단 제제 안에 띵기 대화 안 타도 산지고 봐 토비 치르도 람냠술렘비게 단 디네 토발라 람냠술렌데 냠는 제제 산지고 봐 토고 바래 제사다 산지고 봐 토발라 냠는 제바다 한 제르미 치기디마 손시베 람지림바 차산 뒤제 안에 진강서 람림징 손샤바디 디토래 양서 어두스네 다 냠는 제기 로병
Good evening. So in order to attain a state of lasting happiness, a state freed of all suffering, in particular that of the state of supreme bliss, that of Buddhahood, we have to cultivate, train our mind. And to train our mind to reach the point of perfection, the point of Buddhahood, one needs to cultivate independence on a particular sequence of practices, various mental paths. To enable that, to make it so much easier, Geshe Lama Tsongkhapa composed this text, this compendium of the graduated stages to train one's mind in order to achieve enlightenment. And these stages of training are what we so as an introduction to the stages of training is where we are looking at the moment.
네 가려서네 중del이야 키셔로스마나 안델이야 상이 유송비 덴바 가메도 도베기 도투그리에세지 가와메바 도투그리에세야디 다 가와메바세야디 상이 유송비 송디 안에 가시 냠술랭고리 가시 냠술랭고고 말에세야나 아주 베네 이게 태화침비 취념는 제발라 년여다 랑제이 람데 장주 냠는 지고 말에 대해서 고야요 말했어야다. 니네가게 냠는 지고 말했어야다. 양가 냠는 제겐진다. 파신 대바디기 반집 바로 집에 람디기 냠는 지고 말했어. 뒤서 봐 고야요 말했어. 니네 삼다바는 근데 지게 저기 봐 인지 책으로 봐. 지다 니네 자다 가서 람림 텔이야 로정 제도 가라하고 그러세네 상지기 송비유 룽 간데시나 가서 상지 고봉 토발라 차상 냠술랭 고바디 하고 두그리에세 제사 템바템 주가메도 또베게 또 두그리에세야데 제사 델레텐데 두스토 두그리에세 가서 가서 네 딘마 소야 쉬야 된데 디고 쉬르바 그신데
These stages in which this particular graduated sequence of practices to engage in order to train our mind to give rise to the required mental paths in order to achieve enlightenment, that Lama Tsongkhapa included in his text, the middle-length Lamrim, has as its root source Lamp on the Path to Enlightenment by Lama Atisha, and establishing the greatness of the author of the root of the source text. That was the first section that we looked at, the greatness of the author, Lama Atisha. Now we've come to the second section, the greatness of the Dharma. And this has 4 sub-points. We started to look at the first last week, the greatness of understanding that the teachings of the Buddha are not, or there aren't any that are mutually exclusive. So I think that the translation uses the word not contradictory, but rather mutually exclusive is perhaps better. But the meaning of this section, of this particular greatness, is that to overcome the view that thinks, well, in order to achieve enlightenment, there are certain teachings that I do not need to, the certain teachings from the Buddha that I do not need to train my mind in. This is, the purpose of this section is to recognize that there are no teachings by the Buddha that are to be abandoned or ignored in order to attain enlightenment. And this is important because some may think, to become a Buddha, I only need to engage in the perfection vehicle. I can exclude Tantra. Or others may have the opposite view and think, in order to become enlightened, I only need to engage in the Vajrayana, the perfection vehicle. This I can just ignore. And there are other ways of thinking. Also, perhaps I only need to train in the Mahayana and I can ignore the Theravada teachings. So here we come to see in the section that we are on that none of the teachings of the Buddha are to be excluded.
Sanji yu sungbi yu sungji chasan sanji yu kuma thoba la chasan lobjang je gore nyamlen je go ba da go tugri esi ro chisa di da de la a ku gri ese je ane di nyamlen je go ba garu gimchen ro ji garu yor sen del ya ane gimje lungda ri ba ni che dine ndi che ni yore je lunggu thone ya chasan nyamlen je go ba di lungle sung yore se ri ba sam da ya na chasan nyamlen je go ba da ha go tugri ese The riba samdado karasine, Jenshu Senpa degi ane sanjiyo gobang toyage Jenshu Senpa ge donna zowa de karayalane simjen la pando tuya dire, jisan simjen la pando tuya re. Jisan simjen la pando tubala, nyandu ki rijen, nyandu ki rijen la ya pando tubu gore, nyandu rangya da rangya rijen la ya pando, jisan tyaba chimbe rijen, deso la ya pando tubu, jisan tyaba sumge ge rijen ye kansa tamje la ya ridan rijen kansa nyan pando tubu gore. Jisan da nyandu ki rijen la pando tubu la, nyandu ki lam tenshin gore, jisan tenshin tenpa la soso ge nyamlen gore, jisan soso ge nyamlen to de ten gore, rangya lam na da gore. Tene isa, sanji yu sonji be nyandu ki lam da rangya tyaba konzolo sonji begi, tenche degi le tuyasamde digi duanda, nyandu ya lam da rangya nyamlen chiko badi, gyumsen dire. Karasa rangya nyamlen maje bayna, rangya shingi mare, ma shingi bayna, shenli ya tentu mare. Shen tenpodo na konzo le pando chubtugo mare was. Chesnada nyandu ya da rangya da tenzu le pando chuba la, konzo lam tengu gore. Lam tenpa la, lam de sosuki nyamnyo da hago shingo gore. Shingo sheba la, dene sonji be tenju le ya tuyasam je gore was. Chesnada dene za rikpa gyuni samtawe ne, that sanji yu sung chasan le tuyasam je goya dang, di yu duanda digi nyamle je go ba di gyumse roji di rikpe chuba dang. Anji lung se de na lung ke singa zu jisun jamba kumbe sung yo re se je ten ten chung do yen na le jisun jamba kumbe sung yo re se je o do se di men be ge do da de ne ge lung mang bu go re de lung le sung ba re se an ke singa zu di go ma shu sa ba re.
Of this first greatness, we started to look at it last week, and it was presented that in order to attain enlightenment, one must train in all the teachings of the Buddha. And why is this so? There were two divisions of answers were given, one being scriptural. So there was quotations from Maitreya, where he states in the Ornament of Clear Realizations that one needs to engage in all the trainings of the Buddha in order to attain enlightenment. So there are valid quotations that one can rely on in order to establish that one must train in all the teachings of the Buddha in order to attain enlightenment. And in addition to the scriptural quotation, reasons were presented. So the purpose or the objective here, the purpose of attaining Buddhahood is to become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings without exception, no matter who they are. Not only certain types of sentient beings, but all without exception. So this doesn't just include those who are like the bodhisattva who's striving for Buddhahood, in other words, fellow bodhisattvas or those who aspire to the paths of bodhisattvas, but it also includes those who don't have an inclination for the paths of bodhisattvas, or their inclination is weak. So those who have an inclination rather towards the trainings of hearers and solitary realizers. So the bodhisattva needs to train in the practices that are shared with hearers and solitary realizers in order to be able to benefit practitioners who are most inclined to those trainings. So with such an understanding, a bodhisattva with a motivation to become a Buddha for the sake of all beings will engage in hearing, reflecting and meditating on teachings that are associated with the trainings of hearers, solitary realizers and bodhisattvas. Because if one doesn't have knowledge on a particular topic and experience through training one's mind in it, one will not be able to successfully guide others for whom such a training for whom are suited to such a training. And therefore, the Bodhisattva, or the later Buddha, would struggle to benefit that being. Therefore, the practitioner needs to be broadly knowledgeable and have a wide basis of experience. So that then is what we looked at last week, the reason establishing why practitioners or bodhisattvas need to engage in training in all the Buddha's spiritual instructions.
Andinigi lung dang riba tu share he lung ni chesu jamba ko beso do na le ne dini sungo re bene jianshu senpa namji nyandu ye lam tham je da rang sa ji ye lam tham je da sa yi ye lam gang yin ba de da tham je jie ba jia xin xie ba jia wo se lam de da gi yong su zo ba jia xin lam de da gi jia wa ya jia la 제가 내게 람디기 파시에 버지 차사하고 와지 되는 봐 안자와 이제래 펜바 주고 그래 자와지야세 언드네 순거래 안도 나라 순거래 안디 멤비게 데데 벤데 최최이답이 가르송어서 탑중 대주에 가서 고교 봐 대시에 벤데 가와 인세 제가 탑중 대시에 고교 봐 대시에 벤데 가와 인세 제가 소수기 마신바 디션을 셰발을 갈래 하고 그래서 제가 탑중스의 샤엘이야 파 되게 람냠이 시에게다 롭종 제게 샤엘이야 롭종 가를 제고나 디제고에디 소소 힘고 거래서 수고도 유발하나 마신 봤어요 봐 제가 탑중 대시 고기로 봐 대시 반에 가와 제가디 하 먹어 있나 샤엘이야 된투 말해서 제가 갈래 하고 그래서 제가들 룽되네게 망보 연구하래
There are many scriptural sources establishing that in order to attain Buddhahood, one needs to cultivate all the spiritual instructions that the Buddha taught. So I mentioned the one from Ornament of Clear Realization by Maitreya, but there are others from the Buddha himself in sutras. There's one where the Buddha said that in order to attain the path of no more training, or Buddhahood, one needs to train in all the paths of hearers, solitary realizers, and bodhisattvas, in order to be able to guide others, for whom those paths are suitable. And if one cannot do so, one would not be able to benefit them. So there was a quotation from the Buddha presenting that. And here was another quotation, which I can't repeat. There's a translator, but the meaning of it is that in order for the bodhisattva and the eventual Buddha to have a wide array of skillful means at their disposal to be able to benefit the complete multitude of beings, the bodhisattva needs to train in all the spiritual instructions of the Buddha.
아디레든 마 나지바 자연 지바서 지비기 지바 양자 데 냠는 제고의 지바지 삼당 데마 송고 셴양 항상 양다 부르 조베 사기니 균 초레 세바다 연된 초레 조바 민지 균지 직탐지 세지 연된 직탐지 용조 조바 인라스.
Let's turn to the text. So if you're using the ebook, it's near the middle of page 13. If you're using the published book, it's at the top of page 14. So just before I read what Genla read, we're going to start from where we were last week. And the last three words in the sentence we concluded with last week, and certain precepts. That's not in the Tibetan, hence last week it wasn't read. So the Tibetan just goes as far as, such as the aspiration for individual liberation. So now to where we're going to start this week is to present further reasons why those who aspire for Buddhahood need to train in all the spiritual instructions of the Buddha. In perfectly complete Buddhahood, it is not that faults are partially ceased and excellent qualities are partially completed, but rather every kind of fault is eliminated and every excellent quality is completed.
ane yang dabar zobe sangye ne gyun chokre seba gyun kashi bangje chasa mabane kashi bangba ne sangye chagiri besne sangye mare so sangye la ne bene yang ju nyomo ba sabo na cheba bangje bacha bangme ne sangye chag mare sangye se de gyun chokre basne kashi bangba seba jila sangye chag mare i mare ai yende 용 초르바 안 조바 민지스데 연대에 가라 강섬이 장체 대누 장유 하되바이나 상예 말에서 다던나라 간시 상예세데 균 용모번 방고에게 지고로 방제 가시 방매바이나 상예 차기 말에 연대이나 망부지 랍제 대누 랍질 하되바이나 용 랍이에게 조 살면은 된 상예 차기 말에서 donda 디서를 균 초레세 바다 균대 초레 조바 말에서 Sangye Mares.
In answer to the question, has a Buddha only partially abandoned faults and only partially developed good qualities? Well, the answer is a very definitive no. And the clue is in the common expression for Buddhahood. We see at the start of the sentence, perfectly complete Buddhahood. This then indicates that faults have been perfectly and completely eradicated. There's no trace of fault left in the mind of a being that is a Buddha. And likewise, all good qualities have been perfectly and completely developed. There is no further quality to be developed. So therefore, the abandonment of faults and attainment of qualities that is associated with the abandonment of the afflictions together with their seeds, that is an insufficient level of attainment to be considered a Buddha. Because there is still the stains to be eradicated, and therefore the good qualities also have not been perfectly and completely developed. A Buddha has, by definition, completely and perfectly abandoned all faults and developed all good qualities.
Dine zanna sangye seji kandashi lagire sane gyun yirik tamche seji yunde yirik tamche ane yonsu zoba yinla sede sangye seji ane kandashi gyun yirik chasa bangu gures meaba bang sawash gures ane gyun yirik tamche seji sede nyumomba triba bacha da jeba bang chasa bang sawa bangji yunde yirik na chasa da 토비에 이직 연대 용수 줘봐시다 딜레 연대 라바시다 덕규 되네 라요에서 매바 차상지 장외 차상 장사와 신차와 연대 예사와 고고래 그래서 균 이직이네 차상 방사와래 다 대방유 라되 봐서 라요에서 매바지 차상 방사와 지게 말려 봐 되네 연대 이직 차상 용수 줘봐시 고고 진짜 되네 있으나 상기래서 그래서 상세도 지게 뇨모베릭 균이리 방고에 빠져 차상 방사 매바 수에서 상살스 매바 상살시 다 용수 연대 이리 용수 줘봐세도 톱고에 연대리 용수 줘봐 차상 톱차와지 되네지라 상예시 거래 상예에 되네지 고고래 인고고래서 그러다
It's good to have this clear in mind, that a Buddha necessarily has completely abandoned all faults and completely developed all good qualities. So the faults, namely the afflictions, together with their seeds and imprints or the stains, have been completely eradicated. And thereby all good qualities have been completely and perfectly developed. There is no partially developed good quality or partially abandoned fault. A Buddha is a perfected being. And this is evident in the name of Buddha, so in Tibetan, as Sangye. Sang refers to all the faults, the afflictions together, the seeds and imprints, have been completely and perfectly eradicated. And Ge, the second syllable, refers to all the good qualities have been perfectly and completely developed. There's no trace of faults left, and there's no slight improvement to a good quality required. A Buddha is a perfect and complete being.
Dine inzadane sangye sede gyun tamje seba yundan yurik tamje yonsu sobachi kugore. Dine inza de drubiki taba chenpo yang gyun tada goji yundan tada yebe nas. De druba se de sede sangye gobani se gyun tamje seje yundan tamje 데 산케레 데 주야라야 아니 냠는 가르쳐서는 태바침벽이 최대 냠는 지고로 와서 태바침벽 냠는 지고 태바침보 양 지자다 태바침벽 최 냠는 제리 값수 태바침벽 냠는 지卷타다 고진 연단 탑자 예배에서 태바침벽 냠는 집에 내가 값수다卷파 바방이 전에卷하자 세용 세배 세다 연단 탐제 직톱니도 숨파방을 톱 내 가슴 질려는 연단 탐제 톱여도는 사이에 차거래지 지산 디 냠능이 림바디 태바침벽에 람 냠능이 값수 지고 냠능이 값수卷디기 릭디야 림바신의 빵제 아니 연단 릭디게 톱고야디 림바신의 톱이 레신 용고래서 그러다 이 태바침보 양卷타다 고지 연단 타다 예배 나스 예배 나세 디바도
Continuing to the first half of the next sentence, since the Mahayana that achieves Buddhahood brings about the cessation of all faults and the development of all excellent qualities. What this makes clear is that in order to attain Buddhahood, it's the Mahayana Dharma that must be cultivated, because it's the Mahayana Dharma that leads through the training in a graduated sequence of trainings that leads to the cultivation of all good qualities as well as the complete abandonment of all faults.
네네 인상 아니 택과현기 있으신 택과현 탐지의 방도기 윤대이 릭탐제 택과침별 남도 누워이노스.
The sentence concludes, the path of the Mahayana encompasses all the qualities of elimination and realization of all other vehicles.
택과현 탐지 방배릭 또배릭 세월 택과현 탐지에서도 택과 당연히 남바산예배기 택과 년뒤기 택과다 랑제의 택과 냠는 집에 가서 방고야기 방제 릭디야 방고고래서 지난 뒤에서 다신 마릭바 다신 녀모바 다신 사바나 제바와 디방고고래서 방배릭 뒤에 토토 고칭이 방 토고래서 연된 타다 예배는 연된 이릭디가래서는 난 되니기 년뒤에다 랑제 이고서 냠는 제발아야 다음에 봐도 왜 셰르 진바도 순서 발아서 봐다 다음에 봐도 왜 셰랍 공고거로와 인제서 또 베릭티기나 아니 냠랭치네 태바침에 가서 냠는 제고고레스 되는 인상 태바 년뒤에다 랑제 내가서 냠는 지역이 빵베리다 또 베릭 탐제 네 태바침에 람년은 두고레스 냠ling 수 두고레스 고 태바침에 람레를 러고마 이나 냠ling 수 두고레스 냠ling 수도 냠ling 제고고로 봐 냠ling 제고서 냠ling 수 두고레스.
Reading the whole sentence again, since the Mahayana that achieves Buddhahood brings about the cessation of all faults and the development of all excellent qualities, the path of the Mahayana encompasses all the qualities of elimination and realization of the other vehicles, of all other vehicles. All other vehicles then refers to the vehicles of the hero and solitary realizer. So their objects of elimination or abandonment and realization need to be accomplished by practicing the Mahayana path, by the Bodhisattva. So they will engage in the abandonment or the objects of elimination, namely the ignorance of self-grasping, and the Bodhisattva will abandon the ignorance of self-grasping, which is the primary object of elimination or abandonment of hearers and solitary realizers, and will cultivate the qualities of realization, the objects of realization, namely the wisdom realizing selflessness.
ane panje zogo kharaju de shirip panje zogo chigo ma do nyurip panje zogo chigo ma ro shirip panje zogo chigo re shirip sidu da nyomo ba bacha 바차되게 식으로 디 반지 조치용으로 그래서 안 반지 조치에서 년뒤에 남게 가르 반지 조치는 다진 반지 조치고로 다도 다지 강사 다진 라게다 니가게 디수로 되네 인자다 제가 캬바 침비기 최념내 산지고방 토발라 뇨모바 빵비게 빵 사본나 제바 빵비 빵바디나 토고고래서로다 제자다 뇨모바 사본나 제베 빵바디 년뒤에 남게 톱시 조어로 건조기 디토게를 저주면 제부 토고래 라게디게 뇨모바 사본나 제바 빵비 빵바디 토에 된다라 람님네 지고 라게디게냐 아나 뇨모바 빵비 빵바디 토에 치도 사본나 제바 빵비 빵바디 토에 치도 아니 람님네 지고래와 제자 디니에서 장슈선반남기야 뇨모바 빵비 사본나 제바 빵비 빵바디 토고고래서 제자 년뒤에다 라게 토고바 토조 톱시 조어디 장슈선비기래 토고고래서 우라디 토고고래제
The objects of abandonment and realization of the hearers and solitary realizers, the bodhisattva also needs to cultivate these, to abandon the objects of abandonment and gain realization of the objects of realization, even though they are associated with the vehicles of hearers and solitary realizers. The bodhisattvas have as their primary object of abandonment the obscurations to omniscience. These aren't objects of abandonment for those of the hearer and solitary realizer, because omniscience is not their objective, it's not their goal. So for the hearers and solitary realizers, they strive to, their objects of abandonment are the afflictions together with their seeds. So this is what the hearers and solitary realizers have as their primary object of abandonment, whereas for the bodhisattva, it's the obscurations to omniscience. But nevertheless, the bodhisattva will also strive to abandon the object of abandonment of the hearer and solitary realizer vehicle, namely the afflictions together with their seeds, even though their primary object of abandonment is the obscurations to omniscience. So in this way, one comes to see how the bodhisattva also engages in the trainings of the hearer and solitary realizer vehicles.
Denigida Numoba Savona Jeba Pambi Pambo Tobala, and the Garaswas Dame about to be sheriff to Congo or Cesadi, Comne Yandura Ranja, the Dame about to be sheriff Combalatine, and Numova Savana Japampi Pamba Tugorwa, and Dina she in that and you send Banam Kia, Yundin Rik, Dame about to be sheriff to Congo or Yunde Rik. And the Dame about Yandura Ranja Namji, Dama about to be sheriff to Gomche. And Pangja Yomba Sabona Jeba Pambi Pambadi Tartu the Tobiodi and Denigi Pamba Mosum the Dobegi Ishedian Kwanskula Kigorova. Dina Shindara, Janju Sembanamgia, Yomba Sabona Jeba Pambi Pamba Pango, Pambi Pamba Toyala, Dame about to be Shera Combalatin Tokores, Di Combalatin and Yomba Sabona Jeba Pambi Pamba Tobne. Pangje Pangba Tope, wants not to be Ishedian, and Jason Bannet to Toku, just not in the Tokuanza, Yamlin Soliti Kuinza, Yamlin to do it.
The hearers have as their primary object of abandonment the afflictions together with their seeds, and as mentioned, the bodhisattva too will train in abandoning this object of abandonment, although it is so closely associated, it is primarily associated with the hearer and solitary realizer vehicles. And in order to abandon the afflictions together with the seeds, the hearer and solitary realizer practitioners have as their primary object of realization the wisdom realizing selflessness. This too, then, the bodhisattva will also cultivate. Because, again, as previously mentioned, in order to be able to help and guide those who are drawn towards the hearer and solitary realizer vehicle, the bodhisattva must have experience of the trainings that are shared with that vehicle.
대치르서 상기의 주비게 태칭의 남게 양라도 수라 탐지 뒤대에서 지다다 상기의 주비 체도 태바침비 취념는 제발라 아니 상기의 남게 양라 수라 탐지 뒤대에서 상기의 숭비 숭차사 태바침비기 람기 제발 냠는 제발라 디 양라나는 뒤루고래서 뒤고래서 양라도 뒤래서 상기의 숭라 태바침비기 취기 냠는 그 숭럽기 양라나는 뒤고래서 지 냠는 제발라 양라나는 뒤고래서 양라 뒤고래서 양라 뒤고래서도 태바침비기 가서 되게 정신sem바 쪼 가래 냠는 지고라서네 태바침비 흉다 텔레야 퇴섬 곰숨지는 쪼 어느 시리방위치도 냠는 지고로와 쇼라 아니 냠도 양라 세대다 쪼 마치는 디 쇼라 년되다랑 이 송시베 상주 송베 송럽비 파솔로 되는 퇴바제 되는데 나 삼다도 냠는 지고레스 양라도 뒤 쪼디 가르쳐왔으네 시리방비 치도 태바침비 흉을야 퇴섬 쪼 지고레스 디 쇼라 디다 냠도 아니 비야 아니 저기 갑갑이야 아니 잡아 년되다라 얘기 송랍되기 상지 송비 송랍되기 바로 donate samda dus nyamne jigore 대사 상지 송랍 간에시네 년되다라 얘기 송비 송랍 간에신 차산 잡아 챔비게 냠ne 지도 잡아 챔을 양락 수주거래서 손 양락 주거래서 디서.
The next sentence, that is why all the Buddhist teachings are included within the various sections of the Mahayana path that leads to perfect Buddhahood. The Bodhisattva has as their primary objective, or the primary object of abandonment, the obscurations to omniscience, and therefore the corresponding object of realization would be the wisdom realizing emptiness. And in order to gain these realizations and abandonments, the Bodhisattva will engage in cultivating the texts of the Mahayana Dharma. But that is not their sole focus, because the Mahayana Dharma has as its branches what has just been referred to, the objects of abandonment and the objects of realization that are of the hero and solitary realizer vehicles. So therefore, the Bodhisattva, as branch practices, in cultivates the objects of realization of the hero and solitary realizer vehicle, and abandons the objects of abandonment of the hero and solitary realizer vehicle. But these are the branch practices to the main practices of the Bodhisattva, which is the abandonment of the objects of omniscience. So the obscurations to omniscience.
나네 윤내에 세바 제바암 윤된내에 제바 민비기 투비송미에 치르스. 지상 상계 송간에지 이내 한균지마 세바 집에 탑람 띵 거래. 윤대지 개바 집에 탑람 띵 거래. 된디시 매된백에 상계 송가요 말이에서 그래. 윤내에 세바 제바암 양 균지마 바야게 되나 탑람 띵 거래. 아니 윤된 직 나가 윤된 직 계획이 되나려야 안 지고마도 윤된 나 균집에 탑람 가야매 봐 상계 송요 말이에서 그러다.
The next line starts with, for there is no utterance of the sage that does not cause the cessation of some faults and the development of some virtuous qualities. This then indicates how the Bodhisattva would not ignore certain teachings because all are beneficial. And bearing in mind, we are in the outline of the greatness of understanding that all the spiritual instructions of the Buddha are to be practiced, some are not to be excluded.
디네 인자 대탐제경 태친비기 미주가 메비시르스. 지자 디네게 송간에시나 태바친비기 가사기 안지기 냠네 제발라 미주가 요 말선 디네게 야 델리아 롭죠 마제바디 용고 말에서 미주가 메비시르스. 대탐제경 태친비 미주가 메비시르스.
This then is made clear with the final part of the sentence, and there is nothing among all of this that is not to be accomplished by the Mahayana practitioner.
나디 이던다 조 가르sun 거래세네 저게 상지 요구방 토발라 상지 요송 간에 시내야 마음절야 냠는 지고야래 마도 디간도 착받침비 쉬냠는 제발라 상지 송디 퇴섬 제고 말들 냠는 제고 말에세디 균여요 말에서 그러다 상지 송간에 시내야 대 상지 요구방 토발라 팬비기 팬베지 팬도 유행 장자마도 미편 바다디네 가요 말이지 되네 상지 요구방 토발라 착받침비 쉬냠는 제베도 차상지 냠는 제고고래 스마도 디 타바집에 취냐는 디 제고고 말에서디 요 말에 매반자 데니게 람림기 람르엔 델야 롭종 제요도 갑라 하는 아주 가르 하고 그랬으니 롱다 리퍼지솔에 데네 두스테 삼나땅요디 어상지 송가르 신나 상지 고바 토발라 야 지금 아주 냠는 제어 지고 봐다 델리 제반에 판도 여봐 지금 짱짱 임바다 하고도 그래 제상 가와 매봐 지 저기 착받침에 취지 발에 년류기 람 년류기 흉티를 퇴섬전에 년류기 람래 롭정 제나 가요 말에 균요 말에 판도요래서 고요래 대 하고도 그래야 돼.
The summary of what we've looked at thus far is that in order to attain the state of Buddhahood, the bodhisattva or the aspirant bodhisattva must train in whatever Buddha Shakyamuni taught. Everything that Buddha Shakyamuni taught, the bodhisattva needs to engage in hearing, reflecting, and meditating on. There is nothing to be ignored. There's nothing to be excluded. And the attitude of the bodhisattva should be clear. Everything that the Buddha taught was taught to benefit beings. There is nothing that should be excluded because it is not of benefit. There is nothing that does not serve the purpose of benefiting. So some of the primary focus, some teachings, some spiritual instructions are the primary focus of the bodhisattva. The others are branch. But nevertheless, there are none that should be seen as contradictory to the goal of the bodhisattva or to be excluded. Rather, the bodhisattva should train in everything that the Buddha taught.
나들이야 먼저게 저게 철아를 접어줘야 돼. 대수 되네기 봐 저기 망고 저게 봐 도주체다 접어줘야 돼. 내 망고를 도주체야 돼. 삼 직접어줘야 내수 저기 망고 용거를 들이야.
So on this topic, when on the debate ground, we look at a topic like this, and there's a lot to say, putting various quotations and having a good time, trying to look if there are contradictions or things to be excluded.
지산 산지기 산조고바 토발의 균남제 빵구고에나 산유 줌nen디 균남제 빵와로 와서 그러다. 균남제 빵바에나 알아서 규규 녀모도 숨디게 빵사로 왔다. 빵사는 님보디 매가서 와. 알아서 규규 녀모도 숨 녀모바 여러와. 디 녀모도 숨으로 와. 균와. 지산 산조고바 토발의 균남제 빵구고를 안주 규규 균디에 빵구고로 와서네. 지산 빵내 님보디지 매가서 왔어. 님보디 매가서나 되는 매가 자살와. 되는 아주 길어요 모두 소야요 말와. 지상 상여 좀내데 견한제 빵바래. 연단 이제 조바래. 견한제 빵나 아주 규규 모두 숨데 견데 상제 빵 레베스. 디님보데네 빵 레베 님보데네 매가 쇠 레베스. 매가 쇠바는 아주 길어요 말레베스. 되는 안주에 상제 레베스. 근데 디거를 진디네 도지 지거래. 상예기 나중에 녀모 두수며로와 디괴로와데 지사 상제 고방 토발라 균 함제 매바 소고래라로 빵구고래라 살아와 상예 좀nen데 상예 살아와 균 함제 빵와로와 대균 빠발라 녀보 땡제 아니 매바 소고와지래 균 함제 녀보데 매바 소나 나중에 녀모 두숨디 상예기 매바 소레베 해서다 대 매바 소나 요 말와데네 니 나중에 상예 레베스 안주 상계 레베스. 녀모바 빵나 상인 거로 봐. 녀모 바셔다 저 빵소나 상인 거로 봐다. 세상 안주 상계 레베스 거래다. 가르서는 안주 녀모 두숨 바셔다 제바 상기기 빵사를 와서다. 상기기 매버서는 매버사사서 와. 칼라데는 결혼해서 매버서는 매버사서 와네. 네 매버서고 말어 와. 다 거서에. 배신 될라 잘라줘로 와. 조세디 결혼에 매버서에 샤베나. 네 락바도 결혼 매버서에 뚝니 매버서에는 갈라고 요 말어 와대. 배신 매버서에 살아 와. 그봐. 지나지 아주 녀모데 상기기 매버서에 봐 있나? 빵바 있나 님보된지 상기 빵송 봐 있나? 아주 녀모도 매가 차기로 와제래. 당 아주 녀모 바샤데 제바도 매가 차나? 아주 상기 차기로 와제래. 제상 아주 상기 레베스. 임비 김자가르스나 아주 녀모 바샤데 제바디 빵차로 와서 빵레 빵바레 가르스나 상기 빵바레 와서 상기 매버서에 와서 그 인데 임비 김자가 상기기 상기 고방 토발라 녀모 바차데 제바 상기 탐제 빵고구리 송도와 디마바나 균 초래와 빵바 점제 상기에 말에 균 타체 매바 소고 송도와 제사다 상기 인아주기 녀모데 매바 소 차레베 디는 가주기를 녀모베 요 말이베 디는 가주 상기 레베 가주 공사 요 말이베 니 두와데 바딩 소지고래.
So in the debate, we remind ourselves of many of the things here to come to a conclusion. So a Buddha is a being who has completely abandoned all faults and completely perfected all good qualities. So therefore, all good qualities are completely and perfectly developed, and all faults are completely and perfectly eradicated. And this is agreed to. And Buddha Shakyamuni was such a being who had completely and perfectly abandoned all faults and completely and perfectly developed all good qualities. So Buddha Shakyamuni is an illustration of that. So if all faults then have been abandoned and all good qualities, in particular here we would say the antidotes to the faults, have been perfectly developed, so all the faults, so the three poisons, have been completely eradicated and the antidotes have been completely and perfectly developed, then surely we must be Buddhas. Because if for a Buddha Shakyamuni, for example, to be a Buddha, all faults must be perfectly abandoned and all good qualities perfectly developed. So therefore, the faults on our continuum surely must have been completely abandoned, and our good qualities, in particular the antidotes, must also be perfectly developed.
상예기 년뒤게 남래야 안지게 년뒤 남든지 깨발 제고래서 셰발 제고래서 년뒤 상예 전주선바 남기 네 상제 고모 토발라 년뒤게 남든지 깨고고래 세디 코로나주길라 전주선미길라 깨고고래서 송거로와 어다 데네 랍도 안 년뒤 졸람바당 네드지게 통람발라소비 남디게 안 전주선미길라 요르베스 깨요르베스 깨나 디 년도 코로나주 강사의 코로나 규례 유딩의 셈 람르와 로르와다 제스마 로르와 람르와 지제 디 장주선 비규례기나 장주선 바다 라인에 강사 코로나 카하르와 타데바르 와서 제상 강사 시행 권이 강사 타데제메 타데바르 제상 년도 유기 람시드 년도 초람바 코로나 규 람나 년도 졸람바도 통람비 규기 코로나 규기 konzu 규기 람디 장주선 비규례기 여르베스 가서네 상기 년도 전주선 비규라 년도 람 예바르자 예고레 한 셰바 제고레 송도와스 안에 도시네 예예여 되네 예여나는 강사 호랑 규타레바레 규타데 비기 안에 람디 안에 전주선 비규라기네 지금 말해서다.
It also asks the question. So it says that all the practices of the hero and solitary realizer need to be known and realized. They need to have arisen for the bodhisattva. So if that is the case, the hero and solitary realizer paths of preparation, they will have surely then arisen in the mind of a bodhisattva. Even the paths of seeing and so forth of the hero and solitary realizer surely have arisen then in the bodhisattva too. So does the bodhisattva have both the path of a bodhisattva and the path of a hero and solitary realizer in their continuum at the same time? But But this is strange because the hearer is one being, a solitary realizer is another being, and the bodhisattva is supposed to be another. But we're now saying that they should have all the parts of hearers and solitary realizers arising within the bodhisattva, bearing in mind that paths are consciousnesses. So therefore, the bodhisattva will have bodhisattva paths, hearer paths, and solitary realizer paths all at the same time. Surely that's not possible.
Andenegi that Jordan Jovata Denegi Chiduendo Sine that Chika Jovajama Wongor Wadine.
There are many other debates that we'd have while we look for validity in what is presented here.
China Denegi that Dorduna Neko Sanji Nyomo Bendigo Lukyun Hamje Bangure Meva Sogure said Gansare Chasan Gule Meva Sogure said Sungo Mardi Meva Sotia Kalehawa Chagruas or Dengi Soso Ranang Gula Nyomo Barikanechina Mahobano Soso Ranang Gula Dineki Akuni Meva Sogure said Chesa Sanji Sanjo Tobala Gyunyi Rik Tamje Bangure Meva Sogure said 소소 라랑이 귤에 니마 기바단 기 사보나 바샤 티기데 매바서의 마음바나 소소 귤라 데니기 뇨모버리 균이 자와기니 매바 기야기니 매바서야 되라 다 균함제 매바서 해야지 소소기 귤라 매바서야를 고고마도 니 현다 가서 디단디 귤라 차상 귤에 매바서야 될 중국어 말에 제상 산지 고바토발라 샘전 탐지기 뇨모메 매바서도 산지 고바토티에 갈래 가보 제거와 제상 소수기 귤라 뇨모베 균직 탐쟁가를 개바데 서번 바샤다 제발 매바서도 마음바나 되네 균에 균이직 가야 개매바 인사 서면서 제상 균이직 탐제 빵바 세디 되는지 소수규라 매바서바 소수규라 빵바디로 고고르마도 가사 차상의 규라 매바서야다 빵바르스키 디 매바서 세디를 송고 말해지래 발렌jap도 대신어도 랭가르jap세네 산지 유념모바트 균 남지 매바서는 이 균디야 산지 매바서 사르베 디는 이 규를 균요 말베 nga 산지 레베스 지고 땅도 렌데라 산지에 고바토발로 균 남지 매바서 그래서야지 Kansa soso rangi gula meba sogores and mahomba guneki meba sogores disunguri mado and kansa dida di gula meba sogores disungo marejeda.
The conclusion that one would come to is that for a being to arise as a Buddha, a perfect and complete being, on their continuum alone, they need to have abandoned all faults completely, all afflictions and their seeds and imprints completely. So it's for a being to be suitable to be called a Buddha, for a being to be an actual Buddha, what is required is their continuum, the continuum of that practitioner, will never again be disturbed by their afflictions. Unfortunately, it's not possible for that practitioner to eradicate the afflictions and their seeds and imprints for other beings. But their own continuum, that needs to be perfectly developed for them to be a Buddha.
년뒤기 귤어 여바데 지부지경 람 년뒤에 가르 공고에서는 탈바 투비 쳐도 다음에 봐도 베셔랍도 공고래 다음에 봐도 베셔랍 디 심비오톤의 띵이지 신이라서 받아 되니기 진바 수준 수비 냠네 지고로 안디나시 년뒤 귤어 다음에 봐도 베셔랍 디나신직 지부지경하지 다음에 봐도 베셔랍데 자신이 미규라 기억 구구래 해서 그러다 세상 녀모배 녀모 되네게 다음에 또 시라 기억 구구래 세상 랑자다 자신이 미규라 예되게 디단 지부지경하는 시간 자신이 미규라 기억 구구래 마도 자신이 년도 유기 람되게 아니 자신이 미규라 기억 구구래 송고 말해지래.
Now, the conclusion to the second debate is that it's not the case that the actual paths of hearers and solitary realizers need to arise in the bodhisattva, But the bodhisattva will engage in the same individual cultivation of the same individual realizations that hearers and solitary realizers cultivate, but these will not be classified or considered paths of hearers and solitary realizers. So the bodhisattva will develop the wisdom realizing selflessness, and the wisdom realizing selflessness of a bodhisattva is not different from that of a hearer and solitary realizer. But the bodhisattva does not generate the paths of a hearer and solitary realizer, but they do cultivate the objects of realization and abandon the objects of abandonment.
Jesa desulia kokten simin damato nyangde sigo mar nyangde simin kasore da dele tarbam nyangde sedi mingdi tago mare jesa dangan ju nyendu ge lam nyamlin jeje nyomo ba sabona jeba pangba thoyde di pangba dele lache nyade lame nyade simin tago wa ko phungbo lama da yede de lache nyade dene nyangan le deji phungbo de gongba soache dene dewa chen la kye du di nyang de la la me nyang de smi da go wa da di na shin ji bu ji nyomo ba sa bo na je ba pang be nyen du yu la nyomo ba sa bo na je ba pang ba de da ji bu ji ya ji je ju sen ba sa ji bu yu la nyomo ba sa bo na je be pang ba ji yo de di pang ba de la la chen nyang de da la me nyang de smi ga ya da go ma les kol mi da go ma les mi ni be nyang de la go ma la chen nyang de la go la me nyang de la go ma les de la ani ka so re nyomo ba pangba kokten siat ma to mingdi ma to la che nya da me nya de kan like ma des.
When the bodhisattva realizes emptiness and progresses along the bodhisattva grounds, they progress through the first to the 10th before Buddhahood. But as they progress through the first 7, and eventually when they pass from the 7th to the 8th, they attain a particular level of true cessation when they attain the 8th of the 10 bodhisattva grounds. And that 8th is just called a true cessation. It's not given any other title. But a hearer and solitary realizer who reaches that same level of abandonment, for them, they, like the bodhisattva, have abandoned the afflictions together with their seeds. But for the bodhisattva, this is not their goal. They are still progressing. So they will just have been considered to have attained the ground, the 8th ground, 8th of the 10 grounds of a bodhisattva. And they will have attained that true cessation and are still continuing. But the hearer and solitary realizer practitioner, they who have attained the equivalent realization, where they have abandoned the afflictions together with their seeds, for them it will be said that they have attained nirvana. And there are two nirvanas that could be referenced, the nirvana with remainder and the nirvana without remainder. But those two terms are only used in the context of a practitioner who's a hearer or a solitary realizer. The bodhisattva, it does not have such a term applied to them. It's not said the bodhisattva has attained nirvana with or without remainder. Rather, it will be said they've attained the 8th ground. So therefore, we see that these practitioners have the same level of abandonment, the afflictions together with their seeds, and the same object of realization, the wisdom realizing emptiness. But because the hearer and solitary realizer have achieved the objective, that of individual liberation, they will have their consciousness will be said to have attained nirvana, or they will have been said to attain nirvana. But the bodhisattva will not be said to have attained nirvana, but rather another level of true cessation.
이제 갈디에서다 갈디 파로도 침비 태바라 대다의 인양 더제 태바로 주발라 대다 많이 놓냐나서지 마인노 냠나.
Continuing in the text, someone may think that may be true for the Paramita Yana, but not for those entering the Vajrayana.
나델이야 독바 지치고 다 독조 가르치고 그래서네 파로도 침배 태발라 되더라 인양에서 되네 파친 대비기 냠낸 제발라 아니 다데 안지게 년두가 남나랑 람디게 바 냠낸 제고 바디 안두시네 이나양 상하 도시 대비 람냠낸 제발라 파친 대비기 최디게 냠낸 제고 요 말을 와서 되네게 독바치리고 그래서 바로 도바갈 바로도 침비 태바라 데들 인양 세드 니지제 바로도 제비게 파르진 테비게 취 냠는 제발라 년뒤에 람 냠는 제와다 랑이 람 냠는 제고 바디 디레스 디기두스 이나 상하 도르제 테비 람 냠는 제발라 파르진 테비게 취디 냠는 제고 요 마라바스 선비게 도바지리고 레제네.
The start may be that those who are of the hero solid to realize the type, they need to engage in the Paramita Yana practices, but not those who are interested in the Vajrayana.
디네 인자나 디네게 도발레베나 다 팔진이 태버려 진소기 세외 예와 타예발로 로비 주 나다 미자양 마사 주비딘 셈게바다 저바 친룩로 로비게 람기 류라발라 자외 대점신의 투모와 인데에서
Continuing. Now, although the way you train in the countless delineations of generosity and so forth according to the Paramita Yana differs from mantra, both the behavioral basis, the mind generation, and the behavior, the course form of the path of training in the six perfections, are nevertheless the same and therefore something shared by them.
어디 지난 팔신태바라 진소기 세예와 타예발라 로비 추응하다 미자야 세도 지나다 팔신태비 가서 진바다 추림라서베게 되네기 냠낸 제비기 다 진발라서베게 rik 냠낸 제다 rik 예와 망부 타예바 주어레스 내내 냠낸 제수 로비기 냠낸 제다다 ngāgi kāpsu ñamne chede jibu chikyāng yungu ma re se jibu chikyāng chobu yungu ma re se de mirā yāng se de 파신 대비 가수 진바다 수림다 쇠발라 쇠비 냠렌제 띵인지 냠렌제 릭지어와 되네 냠렌제 바 릭망부여레스 디즈 냠는 제대다 나게 값은 냠는 제다 진비 냠는 추르스 냠는 차상 지부지기야 용 말해 세래 지부지기야.
So looking at the first part of the sentence, now although the way you train in the countless maybe instead of delineations more literally would be distinct divisions of generosity and so forth, the so forth being referring to ethical restraint, patience and so forth, according to the Paramita Yana, differs from mantra. So here the thought is that the way of practicing does differ.
내가 저기 말해서야지 미저 김선 가르세네 나게 가수 진바다 추심라서베게 되네기 진발라서바 되네 냠는 지게 릭디 아니 차와 먹고 용으로 봐 차와 싸봐 아니 데디디 파르두 진베 갑라 세야지 그래서 라바 릭망고 용거로 봐 되네 자다 탐제 지비지게 자기 말해라도 파르두 진비기 진소 팔신이 두기 냠는 제단래 나게 가수 냠는 제단데 싸봐 요 망부요래서 싸봐 망부요래서 로맹에 대시 겨다 진짜 미자와래서 미자의 김생 가래라네 미자다네 가래랍다 나이 가서 진소 팔진라서 바 냠는 제야디 차와래 딜레 상하지 가서 냠는 전 딜레 차와 먹고 냠는 식 먹고요래 진짜 자산 직과 자기 말해서
When practicing generosity and so forth, the difference or these distinct divisions refers to that in the perfection vehicle, the way of practicing them is much coarser than in the Vajrayana, where the way of practicing is far subtler and there are many levels of subtlety.
차상 미다바래 가서 내가 값은 냠내제기 되게 차와 먹부리 했을 담배네 띵이진으로 시고바이네 띵이진 고메 유디게 차와 곰비로 호랑 뭐 차와 로 차위 되네 곰고로와 제가 파진 테비 값을 시바다 근데 제발래 근데 차와게 냠내직 먹부요 그래서 그러와 담배네 가서 나가 냠내 집에 가라 안지 지게 띵이제 고메 소소라랑 게 류코랑 해용어게 이담 지 검전에 해용어게 되니 지시에 강주야라 소바단 될 때는 이시에 강나도 지게 되니게 잘할래야 잖아 초부야라 소바다 되니게 진배 냠내 용고로 와 초부야라 소바 난디마제 안에 유 되니게 띵이제 지게 곰베 dob기 안에 유 곰베가 로호랑라 신도네 로차와 차위 되는 곰베 토네 네 진비 냠는 제하다 지 용고래 되네잔 파신 TV 가서 시아바데다 차상 집과 차고 말에 제가 파신 TV 가서 시아바데 됐라고 라바로 차고로 봐 제가 딜레이기를 열어 봐 제가 띵이지 곰데 가서래 가서 해유고 곰시 마 띵고디게 곰 띵이지 곰 되네 곰제 안딜야 안지 하 망보젠다 될야 초프야라 소바데네 지금 망고로 와 제소 난 파르자바다 지바 차고 말와지래 제가 차상의 지바 차고 말해서 다 지바 마치베 캬바르든데 되네 곰베 로 호랑라야 로 차와 망보여래지래
For example, in the Vajrayana, when there are many levels of subtlety, whereas in comparison to the perfection vehicle, the levels are much coarser. To give an illustration, when cultivating the union of calm, abiding, and meditative insight in Vajrayana, both the object that one is cultivating and the consciousness which one is meditating with are far subtler than in the perfection vehicle. So in the Vajrayana, when cultivating the union of calm, abiding, and meditative insight, one will, amongst other things, one's own body will arise as the deity. One will visualize oneself within a mandala, within a celestial mansion, and with a number of deities associated with that celestial mansion. And so all of this needs to be clearly visualized, and then one engages in the acts of generosity within the mandala. So this is the way of cultivating the union of calm, abiding, and meditative insight in the Vajrayana. So therefore, the object is very different from the object that one is cultivating, meditating on, is very different from that of the perfection vehicle, and the object possessor of the meditating consciousness is also far subtler than in the perfection vehicle.
다딘마 루거다 주비딘 셈제바당 주바 친주로 로바 람기 류라발라 다베 대삼드네 투모와 인데 세데 되실로야 말아
So again, as I previously read the first part, now although the way you train in the countless distinct divisions of generosity and so forth, according to the Paramita Yana, differs from mantra, and he continues, both the behavioral basis, or another way to express that basis of conduct, and the mind generation, which is bodhicitta, the normal way we say that, and the behavior or conduct, the coarse form of the paths, and that should be a plural, of training in the six perfections are nevertheless the same and therefore something shared by them.
다다 저기 파신 대비 값수인의 냠는 제발라 안에 가르스네 전주쌤 딘 주비 딘 제바세데 제바 파신 주고 냠는 제발라 군노 Janshu Sem Gigores, Jubi Dian Janshu Sem Giguras. Jizan Janshu Sem Gene and Passion to Lamla Lopores. Dina Shinda, Maga Yamlan Chebalayang, Tabachim Chuchigazang, Gunlo Janshu Sem. Janshu Sem Yugune Lang, Janshu Sem Gil, Jeza, Persian Tabala, Janshu Sem Gilkoba Nanshin, Persian Tebeko Shibi, Janshu Sem Yamlendi, Nagi Kapsuan Chigores. Jezada, the Niki, Persian Tebeko Shibi, Juba Chinduk, Chindu Lolobe, part of the Chimbutula, Yamlan Chewadi, Nagi Kapsuan Yamlan Chigore. Jeza, the part of the Chimbicos or Taba Chimbuchu, Yamlan Chia de Lea. Janshu Sem Yugune La de Passion to Yamlan Jet, so Dina do to Hor, Dimato, Dina do to Hores. Di Janshu Sem Yugune Lange, and the Passion to Yamlan Jet Lord, and the Sado Tibelam Yalache La Hores, Jesa Lu Rapa, Rapala Travis, Jesa Lu Rapa said, Passion to you, Janshu Sem, Juba Passion to Lopsudi, just Rats, the Rapa, di Rapa di Yamlendi. Nga dan parodish niga nyamne che huduas jeba drive desam shuni tumo denegi samji tumo ase disore tumo are esore.
Just reading the second part of the sentence again. Both the behavioral basis or basis of conduct, the mind generation or bodhicitta, and the behavior or conduct, the course form or the paths of training in the six perfections are nevertheless the same and therefore something shared by them. Here it presents what is in common between the perfection vehicle and the Vajrayana. The perfection vehicle, as you would have heard many times, to enter into the perfection vehicle, one first generates bodhicitta, and then, having generated bodhicitta, the practices of generosity and so forth become perfections. So we have generosity, ethics, patience, joyous perseverance, concentration, and wisdom, all conjoined with bodhicitta. That's how one practices in the perfection vehicle. In mantra, it is the same. So the basis of conduct, or the behavioral basis, this refers to bodhicitta. The basis of the perfection vehicle and mantra is bodhicitta. Whether, in other words, whether one's practicing the perfection vehicle or Vajrayana, the basis of conduct is bodhicitta. And then the conduct itself, or the behavior itself, is the six perfections. So therefore, this is common or shared, shared between the perfection vehicle and mantra vehicle. Both the basis of conduct, or the behavioral basis, is the same, namely bodhicitta, and the conduct itself, the six perfections.
Jimba, Chutun, Zuba, Zundu, something, Sherab something Yamnachor, did Yamnachor, the Sherab de la Dame about to be Shera, go, the Yamnachor, Kuno de la Dadela, Ranchi, Sambiki, Simbarimado, Yamlenche, Rimbatela, Jimba, Chutun, Zuba, Zundu, something, Sherab Yamnachare. That Tachi Tabachi, Yamnaji, Kuno, Janju Simbi, Simbi, Tone, Jimbo, Chutun, Zuba, Zundu, something, Sherab Yamnachare, Dela Kuno, Janju Simbi, Simbada, Mani Yandu. Nyande ranje dele kuno ranchi singe samle simba dini kheba ma to nyamne je rimba de jimba tsuru suba tsuru samde shere de ta nga gi kapso nyamne je dele ya jimba tsuru suba tsuru samde sherap de re jezadi jeza jibar wa so de chasala janshue de nga ge nyamne je thaba chimi chue nyamne je kuno janshue simbi kune la je jimba tsuru suba tsuru samde shere nyamne je wa jibar 파신 TV 가서 냠len 제도 취디 디레 디 장가게 가서 디 냠len 제고 봐서 응아게 제 파르도시베 TV 주기 냠len 디 응아 냠len 제 봐라 냠len 제 구고레스 제산 도고 요 말해서 원다.
Therefore, looking at both the perfection vehicle as well as the Vajrayana, the behavioral basis is the same as is the behavior. And if you then also include in the comparison the hero and solitary realizer vehicle as the first, then the perfection vehicle, and then the Vajrayana. So for hero and solitary realizers, like in the perfection vehicle and in the mantra vehicle, the conduct or the behavior there we can see there is something shared or in common, namely the 6 practices. And in the case of the here and solitary realizers, the term perfection isn't used, but rather the practice of generosity, of ethics, of patience, of joyous perseverance, of concentration, and the wisdom. And here it would be usually called the wisdom realizing selflessness. And in the perfection and mantra vehicles, it'll be those same 6 behaviors or conducts, but the term perfection will be included because of the particular behavioral basis or basis of conduct, namely that of bodhicitta. The basis of behavior for the perfection vehicle, for the hearers and solitary realizers, that is different. There they have individual liberation as their motivation, whereas the motivation for perfection and the perfection vehicle and the Vajrayana is bodhicitta.
Andire, dineza deshi nganzugi jenju sembadla ane nyandwe da ranje ye lam nyamne chego bigi rikpa kimsen samdade dadera jibarwa. Jesa sanga duri tepe lam nyamne chegendi na lam gyule kiye nyamne chegende taba chimbi chue nyamne chegorwa. Jesa sanga duri tepe nyamne chegende ko taba chimbi kansa insa miyu zo gore shendun jubiya dirwa, shendun jubiya dirwa. Jesa shendun jubiya la ane shendun jubiya la ane riksumbachi bigi kansaagila pando kaso pemba dhugor mada kashele pemba dhugi mara sayde di yomar. Semjen tamchigi duen chego banza nyantui ki richen ki duen chego, rangye richen duen chego re ane parchin te bigi nyamnen chigi ki jesu kansala duen chego korwa. Chizan dine chego ba inza nyantui ki richen le lam nyamnen cheba chue dien khonsu liya lobchon de che lam pando cheba la nyantui ki lam ji rikti nyantui lam rikti rangi nyamnen cheba rangi hako rangel darwa. Dina ne parchin tepa kapso ne tepe nyamlen che nga nyamlen masin parchin tepe de dokyangpa nyamlen che le pando du khonzu le lam den ko lam nyamlen che rimba den ko khonzu pando du ko wa. Jinde du ko za di xin ko le di xin ko ba za chasa ji nyamlen xin ko ya de duen ji ka riba samtane de ji riba de dagarang jibu ji yang cha ko wa da. Parchin tepe nyamlen ha. Disi ma nga ge nyamlen chegen sanga dor tepe lam nyamlen chegen joro wa tepa chimbe chuji go wa. Deni gi tepa chimbe chuji ba za semjen tamji gi duen miyu di gare nga nyamlen chegen sanga dor tepe nyamlen chegen di miyu gare semjen gi duen juye de wa je. Mare di shesa parchin tepa la byong an jugi di janju sembe nyamlen chegen parchin tepa to nga ge nyamlen ma chegen di parchin tepa se go wa. Dedan parchin tepa la dade dinga zo nga ge nyamlen chegen shi go wa. Nga ge nyamlen chegen di ge ne tepa chimbi chu ji go wa. Tepa chimbi chu je wan zang ko zo mi yu de ga se semjen yu duen juye duen da wa je. Se semjen yu duen juye la nyen de tepa da rang ye tepa da janju sembe tepa sa parchin tepa 제 janju tepa de tepa sidda dinade ane kasora sanga dorje tepa yongure ane parchin tepa yonguru wa 제산 차상의 돈 주고 해서 차상을 최 땡야라 콘주게 람 땡고로 땡지 돈 주고 람 땡바라 콘주 소소라라가 람 냠리 리바디 신고고 와지 제시 신고 봐서 소주게 퇴섬제야다 디 냠는 마제네 신야요 말아 와지 대시 리바디게 집지기하다 아주 삼다베나 상아들이 집에 람 냠네 제바이네 계속 80 태비에 감는 수비 람디 냠는 제고바디 리바디레 된다라 두부도 와서
To summarize the meaning of this verse, which uses the same reasoning as we've seen previously, immediately above this. A practitioner of Vajrayana has as their objective to be of benefit to sentient beings, or to express that in the way we usually do, to become a Buddha for the sake of others, to become a Buddha in order to benefit others. So this is the motivation of a practitioner of the Vajrayana. So therefore, in order to be of benefit to all sentient beings without exception, the practitioner of the mantra vehicle, Vajrayana, would not solely train in the Vajrayana, because not every being is inclined to the Vajrayana, but would also train in the paths of hearers and solitary realizers, because the practitioner of Vajrayana has the wish to become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings, and therefore must be knowledgeable and experienced or skilled in the practices of that will benefit beings who share a different inclination to them, namely those who are inclined towards the practices of hearers and solitary realizers. So this reasoning is the same as was presented above in relation to those of the Bodhisattva lineage, who needed to train in the paths of a hearer and solitary realizer as well. And this then is also the case for those who are engaged in cultivating the paths of the Vajrayana.
Venerable Lobsang Dorje 당한 저기 태바침비기 상하 도시 대비기 냠내 제외이나다 당한 저기 안지게 파르도 침비기 태바침비 냠내 제외이네 차상다 냠내 제외이나 상지 유송비 송라 차상 안을 냠내 제고야지레 제발라 판도 여바시레스 마도 디 냠 태바침비 중 아이 냠내 제나 근데 파르도 침비기 태비 냠내 제고 말에서야나 안디니 제네틱 말에서야나 되네기 태바침비 취님네 제발라 년뇌다 랑제기 흉디게 로고 말에 대속이 네 람리아 롭정 제고 말에서야데 디네데 다다 미치게 멤버다 안차상 롭정 제고 구여바 다 안차상이야 안지 태바침비 취님네 산요고 뭐 토발라 차상 냠는 제고 구여바 취 냠는 제바이나 마절이야 판도 여바지 레 선배게다 디네기 녜바냐다 온도시네 지금 상지 송간에 소베네 태바침비 취에 상지고 뭐 토발라 냠레 제발라 가와균여요 말레스 차상 안지기 판도하다 안지기 상지고 뭐 토발라야 판도여바 짠야레 현대 제발라 판도여바 짠야레 선배 삼당 당투고야시다 디네 자다 상지 송시비 동아 나저 가리 냠레 제베이네 차상배 야고레 선배게데 지금 상지 송야디게 균세 균방야당 안에 연den지에가 된다 장장 소발의 차상 판지 야고리 아 선배기 안지수이라 지에데 자고로 안도신의 삼당고야 되어서 디링게 럽센디게 당어서야 안지순고를 다 된다라.
And summarize what we looked at tonight is further on this point of the greatness of understanding that all the teachings of the Buddha or that none of the teachings of the Buddha are to be excluded, meaning that with the motivation of the Mahayana, one should engage in cultivating all the teachings of the Buddha in order to be able to benefit all beings without exception. One needs to engage in the cultivation of the Vajrayana as well as the perfection vehicle, so as to be able to help as broad an array of beings as possible. None are to be discarded by the Mahayanist. We also should understand that whatever practice or teaching one comes across, guard your mind against looking down on some, seeing some as perhaps inferior or lesser, but rather understand that actually, as someone who aspires to the paths of a bodhisattva, I need to come to understand this well, gain experience of it, so that when I meet a being for whom this style of practice would be beneficial, I can help them, I can guide them, ease their suffering and their burden. So this then is how we should understand what we've looked at tonight.
Yumzero ci mongboyo wada nyema diwaine dai boyo diwaine ci dine chung nga nyamlen che so paradu ci bale nyamlen che ko mara sa da anje so paradu ci pe nyamlen che 진짜 nga dige pa ta go yo mara sa da dine ge ga wa ro sam da de gen dine gi nyema de chung yu yu ro wa den sa ne dine ge pa shi ni ka shi yong si ba ro wa dine ge nga chung nga nyam che la paradu ci bale lo che ko mara sa da dine ge yong si ba ro wa dine sa mi lamrim chimba na je rim chi ge da du xin je ba lungda riba sam ju lungi do de du suyo riba de re du sam ta de chasan da nyamnen je na je go ba je na pa do yo ba je na chasan san yo go ba to ba la cha ba chin ba lamni nyamnen gi na le ya du du go res ne ji ka she zo wo chin du go ka she zo wo cha ka she ya la du go re sa ji da song go ya de kim zan ro ji de xin ru ba da.
Rinpoche Lama Tsongkhapa here in his middle Lamrim, as well as in his great Lamrim, presented many reasons as well as scriptural citations to establish that everything that the Buddha taught, he taught so as to enable a wide variety of beings to overcome faults and to develop good qualities. So therefore, as someone who aspires for the paths of the Mahayana, we shouldn't view any teachings as to be excluded or view them as being lesser or to be looked down upon. And this certainly, at the time of Je Rinpoche's composition of these texts, this was a view that many held. I only need to practice mantra, or mantra is not really Buddhism. One should only practice the perfection vehicle. So there were these views back then, and perhaps with some people they still exist today. So therefore, that is the reason for texts such as these being composed or composed in the way that they were, and the great service they fulfilled back then, and perhaps are required still today in our modern world. And furthermore, through understanding this, we can also differentiate, though, that some teachings for the Mahayanists are primary or core, and others are merely branches, but nevertheless, they are still to be cultivated. Thank you very much. And then we can conclude there for tonight. Thank you.